We're looking at that crushing feeling a lot of beginners get, that anxiety, that if you don't follow all these rigid rules from books or social media, you're doing it wrong. And that anxiety fuels so much of the gatekeeping you see online. It sells a lot of books filled with arbitrary rules, but it's just based on a total misunderstanding of what makes a practice work. So this video is focused on how you, the modern practitioner, can find your own authentic authority. Let's talk about what really matters and what you can let go of. Hello, I'm Zihada, and this is where I share everything I'm learning about witchcraft, the occult, and esoteric studies. A study group for all of us still figuring it out together. True authority comes from authentic personalization, from what really resonates with you, not from some external performance or just checking off a list. This is all about helping you claim your path, but doing it with cultural respect. Personally, my craft is a kind of blend, which is my most powerful modern path that is a mix of multiple open systems. It is described as eclectic witchcraft, plus modern mysticism with the core principles of chaos magic and LOA style spellcraft. And for explaining purposes, I'm just wrapping that all up and calling it the creative craft. It's basically my ultimate DIY toolbox, and it's so effective because it treats belief as a kind of technology. So what do I mean by chaos magic principles? Well, it's the understanding that your intention and your focused belief are tools. They're programmable tools you can use, adapt, and even just get rid of once they've done their job. So what I'm here to show you is that your own unique, maybe even messy, customized way of working isn't just okay. It's actually the most potent and powerful way to practice. I think I should start by releasing you from some of that unnecessary pressure. There are a few major misconceptions that just stop people in their tracks. So myth number 1, you must follow one right way to practice. This one is huge. It's the foundation of what you could call, beginner paralysis. Embracing a personal craft is, it's more like learning an art form than doing a math problem. There's no single right answer. There's no correct way. Every valid path is built on what resonates with the individual. And if a rule or a technique doesn't feel right to you, following it actually makes your work less powerful. So you have permission to build it your way. Here's the second myth. It's all over social media. You need all of these expensive tools and aesthetically perfect setups. The altar that looks like it's ready for a photo shoot. It's fascinating, right? People spend so much time on the packaging instead of the actual product. It's driven by consumerism, not spirituality. I was there. Look, tools are optional. They're aids. They help focus your energy. But the real power, that's internal. It comes from you. I like the analogy of a magnifying glass. The tool doesn't create the light, right? It just focuses the energy that's already there. Your energy. Your intention into a single powerful beam. That makes you the most powerful ingredient in any working, period. If you can focus your will, you can work magic with, a stick you found on a walk, or just strong visualization. It's not about being camera ready. Now for a classic point of confusion, myth number 3, you have to be Wiccan, or, initiated into a coven to be a real witch. This is a critical distinction that gets so blurred. Wicca is a specific religion. It's a modern nature-based religion from the mid-20th century, with its own cosmology and deities. But witchcraft is a practice, a set of techniques for working with energy that, it predates Wicca by thousands of years. It's the how, not necessarily the what or the who you believe in. You can be any faith or no faith at all and still practice. So you can be a Christian witch, a Jewish witch, an atheist witch, But being a solitary practitioner is completely valid. You don't need permission. You don't need initiation. You don't need a membership card. Your craft is yours, and its validity comes from your results. And finally, the big one, the fear that stops people from even trying. Myth number 4. If you make a mistake, you'll invite harm or some kind of disaster. This comes from treating magic like it's computer code, where one wrong keystroke crashes the whole system. And that's not how it works. In reality, most missteps are just harmless. If your intent is a little fuzzy, or you used a color that didn't really resonate with you, the spell just kind of fizzles out, or the result is really weak. Mistakes are valuable. They're teachers. They show you what doesn't work for you. They let you refine your technique. Those so-called rules, specific moon phases or whatever, they're guidelines. They're meant to be adapted, not treated like absolute law. So you're not going to unleash chaos because you used a green candle instead of a gold one. You just adjust. You learn and you focus on the power of your will next time. So now that we've cleared away what your craft isn't, it's not rigid, it's not bound by all these rules. Let's get into what it actually can be. And to do that, to really build your own path, you need to understand the different components that people often just jumble together. We need to clearly define these categories, specifically to avoid confusion and cultural disrespect. So first, you have witchcraft. This is the personal creative practice of using intention and symbolic action to create change. Second, you have religions and closed systems. These are cultural lineage-based traditions. Think voodoo, Santeria, Ifa. These are things that require initiation. Yes, they're sacred. They're culturally specific, and you generally can't just decide to practice them. They are not the same as eclectic witchcraft. And then there's the third category, philosophies, things like Stoicism, Taoism, Hermeticism. These aren't magic in themselves, but they provide these incredible intellectual frameworks for understanding reality, so they inform the craft. They give it a metaphysical structure. How does that work? Well, Stoicism is all about controlling your internal state, regardless of external events. Think about that for magic. If a spell doesn't work, a Stoic witch doesn't despair. They analyze, they stay calm, they control their own energy, which is the most important ingredient for the next attempt. Another example is Hermeticism, with its whole as above, so below principle. That philosophy helps you understand the concept of correspondence, how the small things reflect the big things. You can borrow those lenses freely, and you can also borrow from pop culture magic, using things like Star Wars or The Matrix. I know what you're thinking. Is that really a legitimate practice? Absolutely. It's a legitimate and, frankly, very clever modern practice. It completely reframes how you think about symbols. This is where those chaos magic principles I mentioned really come into play. Practitioners use fictional symbols, archetypes from movies, books, video games, and they use them as powerful and totally ethical tools. And it works because the connection is personal. It's rooted in psychology. It leverages belief systems we're already deeply invested in. An archetype that you deeply connect with holds way more personal power for you than some obscure ancient symbol from a book that means nothing to you. So, for example, someone might draw on energy work from Star Wars. The Force is just a brilliant modern term for a universal, non-dualistic energy field. It aligns perfectly with ancient concepts like chi or prana. So when you visualize using the Force, you're tapping into the same mechanism as someone practicing, say, pranayama breath control. You're using a metaphor that is powerful and immediate for you. Or maybe using ideas from the Matrix, like viewing reality as programmable, which aligns perfectly with manifestation theory. This is completely harmless and ethical because it's open source, essentially. There is no cultural group being exploited. You're using a story as a functional container for your intention. You're treating belief as creative technology. If thinking of yourself as the one from the Matrix helps you focus your will, then that connection is what makes it effective for you. But now we get to the most important part of this whole conversation. We spent all this time saying that your empowerment comes from personalizing your practice. But that freedom absolutely must be balanced with responsibility. This is the boundary setting. You have permission to explore any open system, but you do not have permission to appropriate or practice closed systems that aren't yours. Ethical practice means knowing the difference. So let's be really specific. What practices are explicitly labeled as closed? It includes hoodoo, which is a specific African American folk tradition, Haitian voodoo, Santeria, Ifa, and the sacred spiritual rites of many indigenous North and South American traditions. Why is it so important to maintain that boundary? For something like hoodoo, for instance, you have to understand the history. Hoodoo developed as a system of spiritual defense and justice for enslaved and oppressed African Americans. It's tied to a specific history of trauma. It's tied to that culture. So to practice it correctly, you need to be part of that cultural context. To ignore that is just cultural theft. It reduces a sacred survival system to a trend. And probably the most common example of this we see online is smoke cleansing with white sage. This is maybe the most visible form of appropriation out there right now. It's everywhere. But smudging with white sage is a deeply sacred indigenous rite, and numerous Native people have explicitly asked outsiders not to use it unless they are invited to. And there's a painful history there, a very painful history. These practices were outlawed for them by the US government until 1978. That trauma is still very real. So, to see it used as just a trendy prop ignores that suppression. So, the rule of thumb is simple. You can draw inspiration from open philosophies and stories, but rituals and sacred tools from closed cultures are off limits. Full stop. And the best part is, you don't have to. There are so many powerful, open alternatives for things like cleansing. You lose absolutely nothing by being respectful. So if you want to cleanse your space ethically, what are the alternatives? You can smoke cleanse with open, non-sacred herbs like rosemary, lavender, cedar, mugwort, things that are widely available. Or you can do air cleansing with sound, ringing a bell, clapping. It's incredibly effective. And if you don't want smoke, you can use salt water or sweeping, or even just focused visualization. The intent is the same, but the method is respectful. There's also a really interesting nuance here about borrowing ideas versus rituals from those philosophical systems we talked about. It's generally fine to study and draw inspiration from the philosophies and worldviews of open religions like Christianity or Buddhism, but you have to respect the line. You can absolutely draw inspiration from open philosophies and worldviews, but specific internal rituals or priestly traditions within them might still be closed. An example would be Western esotericism that uses something called Hermetic Kabbalah, often with tarot, which uses the tree of life as a kind of philosophical map. That's generally open for study. But Jewish mystical Kabbalah, the original living tradition, that is inherently closed unless you're Jewish and meet very specific criteria. The key is respecting the source and the boundaries of a living tradition. So, we've cleared away the external pressures. We've set the ethical boundaries. Now we've come to the core message, the fun part. Letting go of the anxiety from all those conflicting books and actually creating a magical language that is truly your own. This is where you really start to own your craft. This is where you move past being a beginner. And that shift, it starts with understanding correspondences like the symbolic language, green for money, blue for healing, that kind of thing. These are tools. They are guides. They are not mandates. And what's so wild is if you pick up 5 different books, you'll get 5 different lists of correspondences. You know, this book says blue is for healing, another says it's green. And the reason those lists conflict is because they were always personal to begin with. So how do you know which one is right? The answer is the one that's right for you, the one that resonates with you most powerfully. So if you've always associated, say, the color gold with healing, then you use gold, even if every book says blue. If green means calm and healing to you because of your own life experiences, then green is the most powerful color you can possibly use. Your strong personal association significantly amplifies your work. You're amplifying the magic. You have permission to write your own magical dictionary. It makes it far more effective than forcing yourself to use a symbol that means nothing to you. Your instinct is a valid source of knowledge, and this extends to creating your own tools, like sigils. You don't have to use ancient symbols you don't really get. Creating your own sigils, these simple abstract symbols for your intention, is one of the most empowering things you can do, and that process infuses it with your own energy directly. A symbol you make yourself, charged with your personal meaning, is almost always more effective than one you borrow, because that connection is so direct and visceral. Okay, last thing to redefine: timing. People get so stressed about moon phases and planetary hours, but these are helpful frameworks, not absolute requirements. It's more about your personal rhythm. Notice how you feel during different cycles. If a book says the waning moon is for banishing, but you feel most energized and focused, then use it for manifestation. Your personal energy trumps the calendar. If you need to do something at noon on a Thursday, the immediate need is more important than the so-called correct planetary hour. For me, personally, I only focus on the full moon. I don't work with the other moon phases, well, right now. That may change later in life if I see fit. And your practice should serve your life, not become another stressful chore on your calendar. It should enhance your life, not rule it. If you only feel called to practice once a month, that is a valid practice. It's perfectly fine to take breaks or to only do small things. Stirring your intention into your morning coffee, that is 100% valid magic. So, when you put it all together, what does this hybrid path mean for you? Is that a scattered mess, or is it a valid system? It means you're practicing a valid, organized, modern path. This creative craft, and its validity doesn't come from a book. It's valid because you are the one shaping it. You are defining it based on what truly resonates with you. And my final reminder is that your practice is personal, and it's yours. It is not performative. It's not about fitting in this gram aesthetic or proving anything to anyone. You are powerful, even with no tools at all, and your uniqueness is your strength. If a rule doesn't resonate, don't do it. Real empowerment comes from claiming the truth of your own personal path. And here's the final thought for you to take away. If you can define and tailor something as complex as a metaphysical practice, based entirely on your resonance and intuition, just consider how powerfully you can apply that same principle to every other area of your life. The idea that what resonates with you is what matters, from your career to your relationships. That is where the real profound transformation begins. If this helped you relax into your own craft, this next video explores what happens when the law of attraction becomes the beginning of a much deeper, more personal spiritual path. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in this next video.